I'm going to stay on my stance that I was even last year, though, Ron. I'm
Mhm.
not going to just bank on the ping pong balls favoring us here, because I think it'd be pretty wild if that happened back-to-back years. And then you would be talking about some serious rigged, we talk a lot about the NFL scripted during that season that became a meme, a joke, and the league even embraced it themselves. You might be walking down that path if you're here. So I am not going to completely write it in with ink, put Macklin Celebrini is going to be a Blackhawk yet. I hope he is, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to take the same approach as I did last year, not expecting us to win it. So then I can only be, pleasantly surprised if we get it.
I was going to say, and just to quickly add to that too, right? At least what the one thing that the Blackhawks and fans can take in and say, okay, hey, at least this is good, even if they don't get the number one spot. As of now, you cannot pick worse than 3. You are going to get one of the top 3 talents in this coming draft. And there's some really good players. Ron Luce has admittedly started his scouting on the upcoming NHL draft. And there are guys that are going to make this, could still make this Blackhawks team much better. So at least there's solace in knowing, hey, the Hawks are picking in the top 3. That's the worst case scenario. Best case scenario, you still have a top 2 pick and you're in the lottery. And even if it's not Celebrini, maybe it's a guy like Demidov or somebody of that nature that you add to this group. Or maybe, again, we told you last year at the beginning of the show, how do you get through the year knowing they're going to suck? Be nice to your ping pong balls. They might reward you at the end of the season, and we're going to feel the same way this year.
Yeah, absolutely, Ron. So you talked about, possible young up-and-coming talent there. Let's talk about a guy who's here right now, but isn't really doing much to help give solace in the Blackhawks' future, and that's Lukas Reichel. This saga has started since basically the beginning of the year. I believe it was early November when we first brought it up here, and now we've got another chapter. He had an assist. He was +1 versus Vancouver, but then he was out of the lineup, out of the mix completely in Wednesday's practice. Ended up being a scratch versus Pittsburgh, and John Dietz reports today that Reichel is not expected to play Saturday versus Ottawa here. So we're getting some more tough love treatment from Luke Richardson, which we've talked about on the show past. I'll read you his quote from that practice when he was, Reichel out of the mix there. And I just want to hear your reaction to this. All right. Richardson says regarding Reichel, we realize when players are down on themselves and we don't want to pile it on, but it's the NHL. We have to somehow push them to get over that, and that's a lot. And a lot of that's internally with the player. We can only do so much. He's putting the onus on 27 here.
Yeah, and I think, I think we've talked about it a lot, Johnny. This has been a confidence issue, it seems like, all year, because he just hasn't. You said it yourself, and you put it perfectly just earlier in this episode. It's a results-based business. That's how it is in the NHL, and yeah, Reichel's had games where he's flashed and he looks like the Reichel of last year that I think gave fans so much optimism, but the results aren't there. And as a result, Luke Richardson still needs to try to win hockey games. That's his job as the coach. Yes, they're quote unquote tanking, but that's a front office job. That's not a head coach's job. He's putting out the best 12 forwards every game of night. And if Lukas Reichel right now is that 13th man on the roster, which more often than not, it seems to be that way, then they have to do it. I will say, Johnny, though, we are inching ever closer to the stretch in Rockford needs to happen. It needs to come, even if it's for like 5 games. Send him down there, let him just play first line minutes and do what he needs to do to get some kind of swagger back. And then give him a chance when he comes back if he gets it figured out. Because right now, Lukas Reichel is continually putting himself, Johnny, in a category where, he's probably going to be maybe a trade chip, dare I say, at the deadline if a team thinks a change of scenery is exactly what he needs. 98 says here in the comments, 27 would be in Rockford if we didn't have all the injuries. And we're going to talk a little bit about those injuries, Johnny, but I think there's a little bit of relief coming on the injury front that might actually promote for number 27 to go down to Rockford and get some time down in the AHL.
Right. I was just going to, you know what, for the most part, I am in Luke Richardson's camp here. I've seen a lot of people on the social media apps, kind of question Luke Richardson's reasoning behind this. Oh, well, quit playing him with dog water. Quit, you're not even giving him a chance. Well, guess what? Lukas Reichel had the chance to step up and be a guy throughout all the year. He got his first line, or excuse me, not first line. He got a center, position, and
Yep.
he did not fare well in that. And we figured, okay, maybe a move back to wing is there. And he still played with some skilled players when some guys were still healthy, and it didn't really pan out there. Well, then you have all the injuries on top of it. And if he's really a guy that's going to flash, you're going to at least see it sometimes there. Like when we talk about an okay game for Reichel, that's what we're talking about. Maybe an assist, maybe a +1. Other than that, it's basically unnoticeable on a night-to-night basis. And I'm sorry, but you got to do something to flash there if you're really going to be a part of this thing in the future. And Ron, I've kind of reserved myself. I would agree. I would think the last step here in this process is a Rockford send down. We'll talk about the injury situation that may allow for that in a second here when we get to the injury report. But we're running out of time here just with the season's going to be coming to an end, in early April. And obviously there's only so many games with Rockford available for a send down there. And maybe that can jumpstart things. That's the final hope here. But it may just be, you may just have to reserve yourself to the fact that he's not part of the picture for this front office and for this head coach, because he was part of the previous regime's pick there. And it was essentially, he was the best player available in a weird COVID year draft, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that needs to continue to be taken into account. And Johnny, there's a weird statistic out there, and it's truly bananas in so many ways at the end of the day. The odds of a player who's drafted outside of the top 10 in the first round of sticking in the NHL are the same statistical odds as a player who was drafted in the third round of the NHL draft.
Wow.
It's not as big of a guarantee as people think. Like, yeah, great, it's a first round pick, but look at just across the league. Look at this Blackhawks team. Alex Vlasic wasn't a first round pick. He was a second round pick. Isaac Phillips wasn't a first round pick. He was a late round pick. Just because where you're drafted doesn't guarantee you're going to work out. But it also doesn't mean Lukas Reichel's not going to be a good hockey player. It just might not be in Chicago. It happened with Kirby Dach. I'm a firm believer that the first thing that Davidson said to himself with Dach was, this kid needs a change of scenery, because he was not developed properly by the first regime. And they gave it to him. They sent him to Montreal. They got a really good player in Frank Nazar out of it, who many people have high hopes for now coming into the future. It might just be that way with Rockford. And 98 here is saying, what he asked, what kind of contract could they offer for Lukas Reichel? A 2-year, $1 million type contract. I don't think it would be two-way. I don't think it physically can be two-way, because he would have to sign for less than $1 million if it's going to be a two-way deal. I think it could be a 1 or a 2-year deal at maybe $1 million, $1.5 million. I would think the Brandon Hagel contract is what I'd say. Maybe just without the term, it would be 3 years. They might give him another opportunity next year. The Blackhawks also might get an opportunity, Johnny, to make a trade to improve their hockey team, and it might require Lukas Reichel going the other way to a team that thinks they can develop him. So I think people have latched on to Lukas Reichel being a part of the future for this Blackhawks team, and that every prospect's going to work and it's all going to be great. And that's just not the case.
Right.
We got the one, right? Connor Bedard's the one that everybody's confident in that's truly going to work. Guys that are drafted in the middle of the first round, late in the first round, like this Tampa pick coming up this year, which is currently sitting in 2021 is the spot. Oliver Moore, not to say Oliver Moore's not going to be a decent hockey player, but he might not be a top 6 talent like everybody expects him to be. Got to have a little more patience with these guys, because the development is more key for players like that, like where Lukas Reichel was drafted versus a guy like Connor Bedard, who was the consensus number 1 and deemed a generational player before he even got to the draft.
Yeah. All right. Well, talking about what could potentially fix Lukas Reichel, I think a lot of people are in agreement that stint in Rockford could do the trick, or at least it's worth a shot. I'm in that camp as well. While he's still here, you might as well. Honestly, Ron, I would have liked to see him down there right now, because the Rockford Ice Hogs play the Wolves tonight. They've got the Grand Rapids Griffins tomorrow, and then they've got a couple of midweek games here too, a Monday and a Wednesday. So maybe that could be the case if Anthony Beauvillier returns. We'll talk about him first on the injury report here. He was finally back in full participant in practice here today on Friday. He's been out with a left wrist injury. I think he broke that thing clean if you go and look at the replay of that game early in January against Nashville, but not going to play Saturday. Richardson said there's a chance, though, that Monday could be his return. And if that happens, do you think that's time that you send Lukas Reichel down?
I think it is, because the Ice Hawks play on Monday. It's a very odd Monday night game for the AHL. You take away the 2 games, Johnny, this weekend, the Ice Hawks still have 26 games left in the season. That's a lot of hockey where Lukas Reichel can play even half of those, maybe get a little bit of his swagger back and maybe make an appearance late in the season to give the Blackhawks a little kick in the ass offensively. I think as soon as Boadway gets back, a guy that we all can probably sit here and confirm is a top 9 forward, as soon as he gets back, I think it's time to say, Lukas, we need you playing. You're not doing yourself any favors not being on the ice. You're going down to Rockford. You're going to play number 1, line minutes, whether it's at wing or center. I could give a rat's ass at this point. But a short bus ride to Rockford, Illinois, going west is, I think, very soon in Lukas Reichel's future.
All right. Yep. I can see it as well. So we'll talk about some other injuries here. I wrote up a little post over on tapsports.com. You can go and check it out for the text version of it. But Ron, as we just go through alphabetically here, we talked about Beauvillier already. Athanasiou was back skating with the side group. I was surprised to see because Luke Richardson felt like he had been saying soon. And we finally got it. He's still not back in full contact practices, but good sign, I guess, there, even though some believe that he should just be shut down for the season. We'll see what develops on that front. We know Hall's out for the season. Seth Jones missed practice today due to maintenance. I don't think anything's wrong with there. Maybe a little bit of a bruised ego after being -4 on Tuesday, or excuse me, on Thursday against the Penguins. Connor Murphy, kind of a mysterious one here. He's day-to-day. They didn't put him on IR. But he has not returned since from before the All-Star break, even though they said he could potentially join that trip. So I don't know what's going on with Murph there. You've got Taylor Radish day-to-day, missed practice Friday, and then Nikita Zaitsev, no update on him. He's on the shelf there. Ron, anything on those? Like I said, Connor Murphy's kind of a mystery for me. Are we getting the Andres Athanasiou treatment for a defenseman here?
We could be, and I think Connor Murphy is a guy that they don't want to rush back just because of the nature of the game he plays. I do have one note to add on Radish. Radish left yesterday's game, came back, but you could definitely tell he went down to the ice and he was really slow to get up, and he just kind of fell awkwardly. I don't know how he got hit. So to see it reported as a quad, it makes sense given kind of the way he reacted to it. Be interesting to kind of monitor him, I think, because he's got a lot to play for, in my humble opinion. But I'm Johnny, I think out of all these injuries, I want to see Andreas Athanasiou a little bit this season, because if nothing else, man, I want to see that speed. Put him on Bedard's wing for like 10 games and just watch what those two do together when they just physically outskate everybody on the ice. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, and you're paying $4.25 million a year.
Nice number.
So, yeah, you'd like to get at least some of that recouped, right?
100%.
In terms of seeing him just quite literally just for the speed and the offensive skill that he can bring, even though there were some issues with defensive positioning and whatnot earlier on in the year. Never been known as a defensive player, though, but I go back to that dollar figure that you're paying him. I'd like to see him back out on the ice at some point here. Right. I just hope for Taylor Radish's sake that, because he's had a rough go of it too, only 11 points through 49 games. But I don't want him to be the guy now that he has to go back on the shelf here, since he was on IR a little bit earlier in January. I don't want that injury to be something that delays a potential Lukas Reichel send down here. I'm sick of it.